What nonsense did you believe for way too long before you found out it was made up? My older cousin told me that U-Haul trucks were always full of whatever the picture on the side of the truck was. This made sense to me. Coke trucks were full of Coke. Walmart trucks were full of Walmart stuff. So why wouldn't the truck with a submarine on the side be full of submarines? I was 8 or 9 when I asked my mom how they got dinosaurs into a truck if they were all extinct. I think she actually took my temperature after that question. When I was a kid, my mom had this old car with a turn knob dial for the radio. She told me it only got oldies radio stations because it was so old. When they gave that car to my brother, he immediately ripped the radio out and put in a new sound system. I always assumed he just wanted the new radio stations. Then I was in college riding in a friend's old Beta car and we were listening to a top 40 type radio station and I was like, holy shit. How is your car able to get modern radio stations? Double quote. So when I was little, probably 3 or 4, I was eating grapes one day and my grandmother told me very seriously that if I eat too many grapes, they'd go down and end up in my bowel sac. Later that day while taking bath, I remember I felt my bowel sac and crying out loud as I assumed it was the grapes I ate. Yeah. It took a while for my mom to convince me that they were already there. Up until I was 18 I thought that when a man had a vasectomy that his testicles were removed completely. And I always thought to myself there must be a better way. My parents told me that the little IR receptor, little glass bubble, on the living room TV was a tiny camera and that it would record me and my sister when they weren't home and they would watch the tape to make sure we didn't lie to them about what we did. This was a throwaway line my mom said once to get my sister to confess to something they knew she did. She was 5 and I was 7, and I believed that shit until I was 18. I knew how televisions worked and I knew how remote controls worked. But for some reason I never put 2 and 2 together until I was getting ready to move out for college and I asked my parents, hey, where did you get that old TV that had a camera in it? Can I have that for my dorm to make sure my roommate doesn't mess with my stuff? Double quote. I'm still feeling the residual embarrassment of that a decade and a half later. That there's chemicals added to pools that will indicate when someone has peed by showing a red ring around them. It never prevented me from peeing in the pool. But I'd always swim away from where I peed hoping to outswim that red ring. When it never appeared, I just assumed the pools I swam in didn't have the red ring chemical. But then found out it's just a bullshit story parents tell kids to keep them from peeing in the pool, which didn't even work with stubborn, nasty me anyway. First time I went swimming, my friend told me everyone pees in the pool. Had to pee. So I just went. Couple minutes later, I see him climbing out. I ask where he is going. He said to the bathroom to pee. Couple more minutes later, someone else comes up and tells me I should probably move. Someone peed around where I was. You can smell it. If you eat pumpkin seeds, a pumpkin will start growing in your stomach. Also watermelon. I remember my grandfather telling me this when I was 5 and I just started sobbing because a watermelon is so big. My stomach will explode and I'm gonna die. Complete panic attack at my family reunion that resulted in my mom having to take me home because I was completely freaking out about my impending, inevitable death. That rivers flow from north to south, and not otherwise. Once a friend of mine was fooled by our history teacher. He asked the class which part in Egypt was called the Upper and the Lower Nile. My friend said the upper, northern, part is called the Upper Nile. It's obvious. Turns out the Upper Nile is more southern because the land and water is on a higher elevation. I once asked my older cousin what BDSM meant and she said Beijas da Sailor Moon, Portuguese for kisses from Sailor Moon. So 10-year-old me started using BDSM as my online signature. Wow, you just reminded me. Someone called me fellatio at school one day and not knowing what it meant I just thought they were being funny and made up a word. Later I was playing a video game and put fellatio as my character name. My dad noticed and was noticeably upset. Props to him. He didn't get mad. Just asked me why I'd written that. Then poor guy had to explain to me what it really meant. Every extra time you press the button at the lights to cross the road, it resets a timer and you have to wait longer to cross. I have successfully convinced my nephew, aged 12, that if you push the button repeatedly it makes the lights change faster. My parents convinced me that the song Saturday Night by Danish singer Wigfield was so popular that the government of Denmark made it their national anthem. I was 10 until I realized how effing stupid I was. One time we were driving down the freeway and I noticed a road named Shoemaker. My brother, who was with me at the time, told me that his Adidas inventor was born. Fast forward a year or so. I'm driving with a bunch of friends heading to EDC in a large van we rented. I see Shoemaker Road again and I tell them what my brother told me. They couldn't stop laughing for a few minutes and gave me shit for every road we passed. Oh look, Nakadishi-san, it's Chocolate Road, that's where chocolate was invented, and so on. It was a long drive. Scratching poison ivy rashes will cause it to spread. The reality is that most people are only allergic to the oil on the plant. So once that oil gets on you, you'll develop a couple rashes. If the oil gets on your clothes, you can further infect yourself. The belief was spread by the fact that poison ivy would typically appear in one place and then crop up in another place later. So the thinking was you scratched it, you spread it. But that's kind of just what poison ivy does. It spreads in stages. There's nothing inside those blisters on your skin other than, well, blister fluid. It's not contagious. That said, the myth has likely endured because it keeps kids from rending up their own flesh, which helps keep them safe from infections settling in. But if you're an adult and you got some poison ivy, yeah, give it some scratches in moderation. Won't hurt you. Or you can get a hairdryer and turn it on. Hold it a few inches above the irritated skin and run the air back and forth over the outbreak, which simulates a warm scratching sensation. Use that a lot when I had a particularly severe outbreak. Someone burned poison ivy and the wind shifted and I got a full body dose of the smoke. Not me, but my sister. When she was about 3, I told her that Prince's "The Most Beautiful Girl in the World" song was written about me. She didn't question it and believed it for years. She even told her friends at school. I also told her that our granddad was a world champion belly dancer and catwalk model in his youth, which she believed for an embarrassingly long time. Additionally, I told my brother when we were much younger that our black cat was a witch's familiar, and that whenever she went out to do cat stuff she was actually visiting her witch. I told him that if he was mean to me, the cat would put a curse on him, and subsequently he was terrified of her for years. I do feel a bit bad about that one, but it did get me the control of the remote a lot and I got to watch a lot of Powerpuff Girls. My father wore a toupee from the moment I was born. He did not do a good job of maintaining it. The sides were always longer than the top and obvious grey hair sprouting up. It was always a mess. I had no idea until I was 16 when I caught him itching under his toupee. My whole childhood had been a lie. I believed my parents were responsible people until pretty recently. It's a sobering, sad moment when you realize your parents are just people. They can be royally stupid and petty and irresponsible. You just don't notice as much when you're younger. My dad and my mom are both effing terrible with money and their social lives. I get this one hard. I have an absentee father and spent most of my teenage years directing my rage towards him. I'm 24 and I'm kind of just now realizing that my mom is flawed. I think most people realize that in their teenage years. But my mom was all I had. So I never considered it until I was older and more independent. I love my mom to death. She's one of my favorite people in the world. But it's definitely kind of shocking to suddenly be aware of her flaws, when I was completely blind to them before. When I was really young, 5-7 or so, I asked what the bumps on the highway are for. My dad told me in a matter-of-fact tone that they are there so that blind people know when they are drifting out of their lane. I didn't give it a second thought and repeated the fact to classmates and teachers who laughed thinking I was joking. I wasn't corrected until I was in my early teens. Okay. This is really embarrassing, but I was probably 12 years old when I realized men didn't have one less rib than women. My parents didn't go to church, but I always wanted to go with my neighbors, and I don't understand why the church would tell the creation story without clarifying that men and women have the same amount of ribs. You can't eat salty foods and sweet foods at the same time or it will cause indigestion. This was a lie. My mother's grandma told my mom to get her to stop drinking sweetened milk with dinner. And my mom passed it on to me for no reason at all. My family also believes in traditional Chinese medicine ideas, so I just figured it was one of those things and never questioned this one specifically. I didn't learn it was completely made up until my mom accidentally told me. As a kid, I used to love sticking my hand out of the car window and play with the wind. One day my older sister and I were headed down the highway to go visit our parents. I guess I was driving her bananas. She told me it was illegal to have your hand outside of a moving car. I believed that until I got out of high school. I'm a dope. Then one day about 3 years ago, I was driving my niece somewhere and she kept sticking her arm out of the window, getting in the way of the side mirror. I spread the knowledge that day. I wonder if it'll take her as long as it took me to realize the truth. I grew up in a tea drinking family. I would often drink tea with lots of sugar. And I would often leave the teaspoon and the cup while I drank. People would say, "Watch out. You'll go blind from that." And I would be like, "Nah, man. Ain't no one I ever heard of gone blind from drinking too much tea." When I turned 18-19 it dawned on me. They meant that the teaspoon would someday poke me in the eye. We had pet rabbits in our backyard when I was about 6-7 and it was mine and my younger sister's 5-6 job to help with the rabbits. We would even spend HRS picking clovers for them and carefully taking them out one at a time to let them hop around the yard. But our rabbits kept escaping at night when we were asleep. One at a time. Never to be seen again. My sister and I were mystified. We had trouble with the locks. How did the rabbits possibly escape? Before winter, a whole lot of them escaped, and according to my mom, the dog spooked them and we'd never see them again. Cut to my being 16. On the phone with you get sister and he get on the subject of our beloved shared rabbit, Marbleen. Hey Ma. Whatever happened to Marbleen? Did she take part in the Great Rabbit Escape? She made great stew. Dot. We ate my pet rabbit. We ate all the rabbits. Dot. They escaped. Yup. Right into our freezer. Cheaper than chicken. Sister and I were traumatized. That I was more intelligent and mature than my classmates. I wanted to believe that I and I alone was the only one interested in learning and furthering my education, even when it was ass-bleedingly obvious that was not the case, because I wanted to feel like I was this paragon of wisdom without actually working. Deep down I knew that wasn't and never would be the case. But I shut that voice up because I didn't want to admit that I was actually a piece of shit. But I was. And only after doing incredibly mediocrely on the final exams and walking away from graduation not feeling as though I wasn't really friends with anyone did I really come to terms with the fact I've been an awful human being and a raging narcissist. Led to an awful lot of self-reflection after that. I don't ever want to be that person again. Climate change denier. I was like 18 before I realized it wasn't some hippie conspiracy. As an ecologist, I don't know how I would explain some of the patterns I see on macroecological scales without it. Also, my mom told me a black line appeared on my forehead when I lied. I didn't believe it until she pointed it out and I went to the mirror. She'd managed to draw it on without me noticing. Scared the crap out of me. It took several years of critical analysis and observation before I realized it was made up. That a raise promotion was on its way and all I had to do was be patient along with thinking of more ways to help out some more. My supervisors led me to believe that the raise promotion was coming for nearly 6 months. But towards the end of that time I got tired of waiting and decided to quit. There were many reasons as to why I left that job. But being underpaid and overworked was one of the main reasons I quit. It wasn't until 6 months after I left that job that a former co-worker told me that it was all made up and our supervisor was just trying to get everyone to do more work so it'd look as if he were a good leader supervisor. It still pisses me off to this day. But at this point there's nothing I can do about it. My entire company for 3 years. You've contributed far more than a senior person could have. Even though you're entry level. Just keep doing things and we'll promote you. Double quote. When I was a kid my parents led me to believe that that one Skittles commercial where they plant the Skittles and it grew a rainbow could actually happen. For about a month or two I had my little Skittles patch in the backyard that I watered daily. Hoping it would grow before I discovered my parents were just f***ing with me. Had my sons plant Skittles at the base of a tree. I put Skittles packs all over the tree before morning and told them they grew the Skittles. They loved it. Did it a few times until they were old enough to know it was me. When I was in middle school my dad convinced me to raise my legs when crossing over train tracks for good luck on your next date. Eventually decided it was BS when I didn't score any dates. You have to get a date first. Then go to train tracks and cross them by raising your feet properly. That gives you the good luck to not trip and die.